fairly new member to the S.N.O.Bs. I've been brewing since 1992, my college days. Somebody handed me a Charlie Papazian Complete Joy of Home Brewing, and that was it. I learned you could brew your own beer, and I was off to the races. I think it was 2014 I joined the S.N.O.Bs, and I kind of sat in the back and listened, and got to know a couple people. I think Jim was the first guy to talk to me, and I met Kara and Andrew and Mike and a bunch of people since then. I remember 2016, that was Baltimore was the HA convention, I think, and running around a couple of these guys, Harry and all those guys, and drinking beer all day as you do at AHA. Ended up in somebody's hotel room and drinking more beer. And somebody said, Dave, we didn't really know who you are. And everybody looked at me, and I was like, is this where I get hazed and get my ass kicked and get forced to chug a habanero IPA or something? That never happened, and we're mad about it. It could still happen. So Andrew, since then, he asked me to put something together about the Longshot competition and maybe go over the saison style. And I told him I don't really know what I would tell a room full of snobs about a style of beer that they don't already know. So this is my 2 cents on saisons, and if I'm wrong, and I probably am, just jump up and say, bullshit. So there's a region in Belgium, a French-speaking region called Wallonia. I have a yes, there it is on a very crappy map. It's I say small region, but it's actually most of the country, right on the border of France there. And the beers that kind of developed there down on the farmhouse, they used mostly locally sourced grains and fruits and spices, and the beer was a lower alcohol beer that was enjoyed by the farm hands, something that didn't get you too banged up while you're trying to get your work done. Saison, being the French word for season, kind of represents that it was brewed in the fall and early winter months and was intended to last throughout the year. It stored well over the winter months, and the traditional examples have been described as provincial or vieille, meaning old, not to be confused with an old ale. It was just kind of a stock ale that they would brew, keep for the year, and dole out as it was needed. The agrarian influences of the pre-industrial style reflected the local sourcing of the grains. Whatever they had, wheat, in addition to barley, and spelt, oats, different kinds of either malted or unmalted grains they would add to the subtle character of the beer. The industrialization, as in this country where a lot of the German styles got consolidated into a very just commercial bland version, kind of happened with the saisons as well. The desire for profit and a standardized product they could brew every time kind of killed off a lot of the boutique beers, and really the beloved style started to consolidate and lose some of its luster and appeal. Recently, American breweries have been leading a resurgence in this style and even expanding upon it, using local ingredients in their areas. We even have some hoppier versions that are kind of a departure from the original style, using American hops and American grains and things like that. Skip over that. The BJCP style guidelines, this is from 2015, describe the style as a pale, moderately bitter, moderate strength, very dry finish, highly carbonated ale with non-barley adjuncts that add to the subtle complexity. There are now versions that are higher alcohol than the original lower alcohol versions that are in the style guidelines now. Craftbeer.com goes on to say that many of the examples are bottle conditioned and may contain Brett and or lactic character. Really, the hallmarks of this style are balance. There's really no component that should dominate, as in an IPA where the hops come over the top. Everything should be in balance, and freshness is another component that should be kept in mind. You should use things that are available to you and as fresh as possible. The color is typically light, although there is a dark version of a saison, but typically those don't go beyond 20 SRM, which is kind of more of an amber beer. The hops should be a low bitterness and a subtle aroma that just complement the other flavors of the beer and smells of the beer.
Are they noble hops?
Yes.
It
Yes.
Be.
Hallmark is
Continental.
noble.
It could be noble. It could be stuff that comes from anywhere else.
Yeah, the hallmark being local.
Belgian brewers is pretty cheap. They're not going to spend for pricier hops.
True. So really, what I saw that last quote in a Zymergy article a couple years ago. Brewers must embrace a few facets of the style, but then let go of the traditional boundaries. And to brew a great saison, you're going to have to get a little bit creative. So the things that you should embrace are the vital statistics of the beer, and this is from the strong Belgian ale saison subcategory 25B. The original gravity 10.45, 1045 to 1065. The final gravity 1002, which is really low, and 1008. So these are really highly attenuated beers. The outline strengths you can see there, 3.5 to 5 for the table, 5 to 7 for standard, and above that for the super or imperial versions. IBUs are relatively low, 20 to 35. 35 seems a little high. And then the pale version, 5 to 14 SRM, and 15 to 22, which that dark seems a little high, but what do I know? So the typical ingredients, it's going to predominantly be Pilsner malt. Belgian Pilsner malt was traditional. Many examples use wheat malt and or unmalted wheat. You can use additions of other grains, and you should, to give a little subtle character there. Hops, low bitterness and low aroma, just to balance out the beer. And there's the noble versions, German and Czech varieties, the Styrian Goldings, Kent Goldings, and as Mike alluded to, anything that's local is fair game. We have, I believe, Boulevard Brewing with their Tank 7 use American Amarillo hops. So it's a saison, but it's local, so anything goes now. Adjuncts and spices, there's limitless options. If it's local to you and you think it'd be good in your beer, give it a try. But keep in mind you want to choose a yeast and the adjunct grains that are going to work together. If it's a yeast that's going to give you a peppery spice, maybe some peppercorns crushed up in there would be a good idea. Citrus fruits on the fruit side work well. Apricots, kumquats. I've heard of a lime basil saison. It's pretty good. Cucumbers on the fruit, vegetable side work pretty good. So when we're looking at the mash temperatures, we want a very attenuated beer, so we want to mash low, right? We want to make sure that it attenuates at that, the 10.2 to 10.8 level. We want to, if we mash a little bit higher, for whatever reason, we could thin out the gravity by adding some adjunct sugars or something, honey, if it's local. Cane or beet sugar might be something to consider. But we want to make sure that we encourage a low final gravity.
But
If we're
when
gonna-
you say beet sugar, you're talking sugar beets, right?
You could use those, or I just refined sugar, just something that's going to be totally fermentable if you're trying to thin it way down. If we have a large percentage of the grain bill that's an unmalted grain, we might want to consider a protein rest just so we get everything soluble and ready to go. Once we have the mash done and we're in the boil kettle, we have to keep in mind that we've used a lot of Pilsner malt, so we want to boil it hard, real hard, to get all those DMS precursors out. If I've heard some advice to keep the boil 60 minutes or under. That kind of scares me. I'd rather do 90 minutes just to boil that out. The reason they say don't boil longer than 60 minutes is the caramelization in the boil kettle could affect the perceived thickness of the beer, and you really don't want those caramel flavors in the end product. Unless you're going for a darker version, maybe that would be okay. So, like I said, I don't know. Do what you want. Give it a try. And the time of year that you're boiling too, if you're boiling outside and it's cold out, and the sides of you have a lot of space above the level of your wort, and it's boiling and condensing and coming back down. Boil it longer. Get those DMS precursors out of there, because it's a thin beer, it's a light beer, that you're going to taste that boiled corn taste for sure. So this beer can be fermented warm, 70 to 75 degrees or warmer. To keep in mind, the warmer the yeast you choose, the warmer you ferment it, it's going to have more of that yeast's characteristics. So if you don't want to get it out of balance. You don't want those phenols and esters to overpower the other ingredients that you've added and you've taken care to balance when you design the recipe. I usually ferment, where I ferment, it's 65 to 70 degrees all year long. So I'll put a heat blanket on it and make sure it's 75, and if it goes higher, I don't care too much.
What kind of yeast do you prefer?
I like the Y yeast 3711 because it ferments.
About what temperature do you like to start your saison at?
I usually
What's your
start
fixing
at 70, and then it heats up, and sometimes the heat blanket doesn't even kick on because it gets going really good.
Yep.
And are you doing a closed fermentation like with a bubbler, or are you doing open fermentation?
Oh yeah, I close it. Yeah. I'm all for the farmhouse, devil may care, but.
No, I meant as opposed to like covering it with saran wrap or
Oh yeah, I use a fermentation block. So it comes down to the selecting the yeast strain, and I have a slide that has some yeast strains, not all of them. And a lot of commercial breweries, they talk about these are incomplete attenuating yeast. So at the end, they may need some help with another yeast to kind of kick them to the finish line. They talk about 80% of their primary yeast, use the rest of a clean fermenting ale yeast, or that 3711, or one of the yeast, the saison yeast that ferments more completely. To me, that's kind of impractical, because what am I going to do? 2 starters and then use 80% of this one and 20%? Am I going to measure by volume? How do I know the starters grew to the same level? So what I do is I'll pick the main yeast that I want, that has the characters I want, put a starter with that, let it ferment down, and then add another yeast, either the 3711 or just a clean fermenting ale yeast, like California ale yeast or something like that, just to get it all the way down. I wouldn't like to pick two yeasts, one that's a helper yeast and one that's the primary yeast, and mix them, because I might not get the character of that primary yeast if they're both going at the same time. So, and that may be an ill-founded fear, but that's what I do. So.
Do you put that helper yeast at the same time?
No, I will add that at the end after the primary fermentation dies down.
You have to do that all the time?
No, if I use 3711,
You don't have to.
I don't have to use it at all.
Just use that.
Yeah. So these are some of the bigger strains, and you can see the four down is the yeast 3711. It can ferment up to 90% attenuation. You can see the other ones maybe not even get up to 75, 76%. So they're going to need a little help, and so you're going to have to pick something. You can pick a clean fermenting yeast. You can pick a Brett if you want a little Brett character, or just whatever your house ale yeast is. So, and you can see the different characteristics, and those are what the manufacturer. That's not me. That's just what the manufacturer says they do to your beer. And so, think of those. Think of the spices that you want to add, and think of the adjunct grains you want to add, and build that beer. I'm kind of excited. Mike was telling me about that Leeuwenhoek Saison blend, and it's on the White Labs, their Vault or something. And it's a blend that's supposed to attenuate up to about 85%. So I finally got the email. They're going to grow it up and send me some, so I can't wait to try that out. And like I said, you can add your helping yeast. It can be a Brett strain if you're looking for that. Lactic is a characteristic that's allowable in the style. Do you want to add some lactic bacteria? I've always been too afraid it's going to turn into a sour, so I've never done that. So. Some commercial examples. They're just highly rated beers that I've saw on Beer Advocate, and ones that I've had, Barnstorm Saison and Saison du Pont being, hardcore traditional Belgian varieties. Some of the newer ones, the American, the Tank 7, man, I love that beer, and it's kind of like the inspiration for the beer that I made. Omegang, Cricket Stave, Lost Abbey make some pretty good beers as well. And I don't know if you've ever had the opportunity to try the fine Barnstorm Saison from Sam Adams, but it's a fine example of the class as well.
Where can we purchase such a beer?
Fine beer stores everywhere. Yeah, Menotti's and Avon had it for a while. I think they're out now.
I've been looking for it. I haven't been able to find it.
Yeah, you probably have to ask for it. It's probably might be gone now, but there are kegs available, and there are some events coming up. But yeah, I should post it to the website. So serving these beers, at the very least, you want to pick at the very least a stemmed glass, a stemmed wine glass. Better yet, a snifter or a Belgian globe, because you want to when you're getting those aromatics, you want them kind of contained and just deliver them to your nose holes as concentrated as possible. 45 to 55 degrees Fahrenheit is a good serving temperature. Now, this is it's a higher carbonated beer, so you want to be careful when you pour it, but you kind of want to pour it a little bit hard because you want it to release those aromatics, so don't be afraid. Food pairings, the esters and phenolics of these beers can cut through, some pretty fatty foods. So, they pair well with cheeses, creamy cheeses, Alfredo sauce, pasta, brie, seafoods with lobster and that drawn butter, oysters, clams, fruity desserts like lemon meringue or fruity sorbets, ginger sorbet, pair well with these beers. So that's what I know about saisons, and for whatever it's worth. The rest of the time, I'd like to talk about the Barnstorm, experience, if you don't mind. It's well, the down arrow doesn't work. I forgot. I entered this contest not expecting anything, and what happened was it was a high water mark for my home brewing career, as you can imagine. It's just been an unbelievable time. I'm going to show you the recipe here. This is the recipe. It's not the recipe as it exists right now, but it's the one that I entered in the contest. The original beer that I entered was called A Saison Has No Name. I was watching a lot of Game of Thrones at the time, and Arya Stark was in her deal where she, didn't have a name. Yeah, that's all I had at the time. So this recipe had the original gravity was at 1061. Final gravity target was 1002. It didn't make it to that, and it's because of my weird mash schedule. IBUs were 31. I wanted to get it on the high end of the spectrum because Tank 7 was kind of my inspiration. It was pretty light. I think it was a little darker than that. 7.8% alcohol, and that's what the commercial version turned out to be. So, grain bill, it's 9 pounds of Belgian Pilsner. This is for 5.5 gallons. 1 pound Belgian wheat malt, and a ½ pound Munich malt. Pretty simple. Now the mash, I don't know why I did this, but I did an infusion at 145 for 45 minutes, and then just to have something to do, let's crank it up to 155 for 30 minutes, and then mash out at 168 for 10. The recipe I do now is I eliminated that and I just mash it at 143 for an hour. It's a lot easier, and it will hit the 10-2 final gravity. Boil for 90 minutes. This hop schedule, that's what I had in the fridge at the time. So why do you have 2 different alpha acid holotype? That's what I had. So we had some Fugels, a ½ ounce at an hour, and Styrian Goldings at an hour, and then the 2 Holler Tau at 10 minutes. I used the 3711 1.5 liter starter with a stir plate. Decant it, let it turn off the stir plate after 12 hours, let it settle, and decant off half of it, and that's what I pitched. Fermented at 75 degrees for 10 days, and then crash it slowly over 5 days to 35, and keg it and force carbonate at 12 pounds for 7 days. And it was about I want to say a month old when I bottled it and entered it in the competition. At the time, it was probably a little overcarbonated, but I just bottle it and cap it, so it lost a little bit, so it was probably pretty good. Being about a month old, half the keg was gone, so it was crystal clear at the time, which is fortunate. So I mailed 4 bottles at the end of June, and it was the best beer I had at the time. It was no grand plan or anything. August 11th, I got an email. They said, you're in the final round. I said, well, that's pretty cool. How many entries are in the final round? They said, oh, it was like 10. There's 8 or 10. I was like, holy shit. So they wanted 6 more bottles that I bottled at the same time, and I just had them in the refrigerator, so I sent them in. So August 25th, I was actually at Platform. I won another competition with the Cleveland Brew Shop, and we were brewing that blonde ale. And I was there, playing brewer, and we're hauling hoses around, shoveling grain, sweaty, and I get this email. I was like, oh, fuck me sideways. I just finished, this competition. So I call my brother, I call my wife, and I quick clipped the picture off of the Sam Adams website and posted to Facebook. And then I get home, and my wife says, well, read the email to me. She's all excited. I read the email, blah, 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 blah. Right at the end, please keep this confidential until it's on the secretary. Oh my God. Hurry up. I just lost this for myself. So I hurry up and deleted the Facebook post. I was so scared. So then, you know, I start communicating with Boston Beer Company, and they want the recipe and the stats on the beer. They're like, well, we can't get that much Belgian Pilsner malt. Can we use American sourced? I don't give a shit. Yeah. Yeah, well, you know, that hops, it's kind of weird. Yeah, do it. Saws, just all saws. That's good. You know, they want, you know, a headshot and a bio, and they want to draw a weird caricature of me. I was like, that's cool. So we had to, you know, so then they're like, well, what do you want to name the beer? So, you know, I'm on Untappd thinking of farmhouse, fence post, haystack, barn, this and that. You know, Barnstormer is taken, but Barnstorm isn't on Untappd, you know. So, all right, Barnstorm Saison. Yeah, sounds good. They liked it, so that's it. You know, so made travel arrangements and, you know, flew out to Denver. You get there, you know, they fly you in, black Escalade picks us up at the airport, we go to the hotel. You know, we have this little reception with the other winners, and they tell you, okay, here's what to expect. They give you a swag bag of, you know, pullover and a hoodie and a t-shirt and bottle openers and koozies and all this crap. And they're like, okay, it's going to be, there's going to be press there at this thing, and here's what Jim Cook's going to say, and he might do this. And I'm like, oh man, I'm kind of scared of this. I don't talk to anybody, you know. So, but it was fine, you know. We went to the reception the next day, and Jim and Kara were there. Snuck those guys in, snuck my brother in, and not snuck, we got our badges. And Jim Cook is upstairs, and he's with the hops and putting them in the little glasses, and they had, you know, beer samples of upcoming releases for Sam Adams. And you know, so he gets on stage and he talks about the homebrew community and why he does Longshot, gives some background, and he brings us up, and you shake Jim Cook's hand, and he's like, I'm so happy to have a fellow Buckeye win the competition. And, you know, he was from Cincinnati, and I was like, he said he liked the beer, and it was great, it was right on style, and that was just such a moment, you know. Never forget it. So we hung out with him, and then we did the rest of the GABF. We did the rest of that day. We did a couple, you know, rare barrel events. We hang out at the Sam Adams booth. We're drinking Utopias, aged on bourbon barrels with not bourbon barrels, wine barrels with crushed cherries. Like, oh my God, you gotta be kidding me. So anyway, a friend of mine knows or used to work for a distributor. Got a hold of a couple sixtels, and we had our release event. It was the same weekend you guys had the No Sweat bus tour, so you guys could make it. But got super drunk at that. And, you know, that was fun. And then I had some interviews with some magazines and local news outlets. And actually, I think Ohio Magazine just has a little sidebar on me this month, June. There's still some upcoming events. I think Edison's Pub in Tremont has something coming up. I think City Tap House has something. There's some other things, but I'll let you guys know and post it on the website. They're scheduling a brew day in Boston, which I didn't know this was going to happen, but I don't know if we're brewing more Longshot or if it's just going to be whatever they're brewing, but that's fine. I just want to see how the 60-barrel system works. That'll be cool. So that's all I had to say about that. The only other thing that I would ask you guys or demand is that you brew something and enter in this competition, because you guys all brew great beer, and you could do this. So
Is it still available in any of the stores? I've never seen it.
it's not in bottles. I don't think so. There might be some that are just languishing on the shelf somewhere, but there's kegs. There are kegs available.
So what do you think about the beer they brewed versus what you made?
It's damn close. It's very close. Yeah. I'm pleased with it.
The page you sent it, though, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I tell you, I'm an evangelist for Sam Adams now.
Paid for all his food.
He got to keep the Escalade.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thanks everybody.